The letter said he had inherited a building. Elijah tossed it on the pile with the other bills, a bitter laugh catching in his throat. An inheritance. The only thing his family had ever passed down was struggle. His grandfather had died in that struggle, his father was worn down by it, and Elijah, at 32, was drowning in it. The repo man was a regular visitor, and the eviction notice on his fridge was less a piece of paper and more a ticking clock. So when he finally stood before the inheritance, a hulking, rusted warehouse on the dead side of town, it felt like a final, cosmic joke. The lock broke with a single hit from a brick. The door groaned open, and the smell of dust, decay, and old oil hit him. It was a cathedral of forgotten things. He waded through a graveyard of broken furniture and rotting crates, his hope, what little he had, crumbling to nothing. This was it, his legacy, junk. His foot caught on a canvas tarp, thick and heavy. He yanked his leg and the tarp slid away, revealing not more concrete but a patch of clean, dark wood. He knelt, wiping the grime with his sleeve. The grain was beautiful. He found an edge and his fingers slipped into a notch. A hidden door. His heart, which had been a slow, tired drum, started to pound. He pried it open. A set of narrow stairs plunged into a deeper darkness, cold air whispering up from below. He used his phone for a light, the beam shaking in his hand. The basement was a time capsule, not of things but of a soul. A single cot with a rusted frame, a small, tidy desk, and on that desk a leather-bound journal so pristine it seemed to defy the decades. He opened it. The first page, in a strong, elegant script, read, "I, Abraham Carter, being of sound mind and a body wanted by the state of Mississippi, begin this record. If you are reading this, you are family, and you are safe." Elijah sank to the floor, his back against the cold wall. The words weren't just ink, they were a voice. November 3rd, 1955. I made it to Kansas. The warehouse is a gift from Brother Johnson. No one asks questions here. No one looks too hard. I breathe for the first time since I left. But every sound is a siren. Every shadow is a man with a rope. Elijah's breath hitched, a runaway. January 12th, 1956. I dream of the river. I dream of the men on the other side. Their eyes. I wake up screaming into a pillow so the whole world doesn't hear my fear. The fear was so palpable Elijah could taste it, metallic and sharp in the back of his own throat. This wasn't just history. This was his blood. April 2nd, 1957. I have started a map, not of places but of people, a secret line of us stretching from the Delta to Chicago. This warehouse is not a hiding place. It is a station, a stop on a new kind of railroad. I have helped 7 souls find their north. A conductor. His great uncle Abraham was a conductor. He turned the page, his fingers trembling. The entries became less about fear, more about purpose. Lists of names, dates, coded locations. And then an entry that made the air leave his lungs. September 15th, 1959. They are closing in. A man in a gray suit has been asking questions down at the diner. He knows, I can feel it. I have hidden the ledger behind the loose brick in the furnace room. It has every name, every safe house. If this is the end, let the record show that we existed, that we fought, that we loved enough to be free. The journal ended there. For a long moment Elijah sat in the silence, the weight of his ancestors' courage pressing down on him. Then he scrambled to his feet, his flashlight beam darting across the room. The furnace. He found the loose brick, his fingers scraping against the rough mortar. He pulled it free. There was no ledger. Just a small, rusted metal box. He opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a tarnished silver star, a sheriff's badge, and a folded, brittle piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully. It was a wanted poster for a man named Abraham Carter. The charge wasn't theft or violence. It was listed simply as inciting hope. And at the bottom, in a different official handwriting, was a scrawled note. The ledger is safe with me. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. Some histories are too dangerous to be found. The man in the gray suit. Elijah stared at the badge, then back at the note. The discovery hadn't just changed history, it had split it wide open. The hunter and the hunted were not who they seemed, and the legacy he held in his hands was not one of quiet survival, but of a war fought in whispers. A war that, he now realized, might not be over. The badge felt cold and heavy in Elijah's palm. Not the cheap tin star from cowboy movies, but solid silver, worn smooth at the points from handling. The man in the gray suit. The words from the journal echoed in the dusty silence. A man in a gray suit has been asking questions. He knows. But this note changed everything. The hunter had become a protector. The man with the rope had thrown them a line. Elijah's mind raced, a frantic counterpoint to the stillness of the basement. His phone buzzed in his pocket, another call from the bank, no doubt. The real world, with its small, suffocating demands, was trying to pull him back. But down here, he was holding a piece of a truth so much bigger than his own eviction notice. Abraham's fear wasn't just a memory, it was a key. And this badge was a lock. He had to know more. The rest of the basement yielded nothing but dust and shadows. He climbed back into the main warehouse, the afternoon light slicing through broken windows like golden knives. The space looked different now. It wasn't a tomb of forgotten junk. It was a disguise, a front. Every rusted machine, every stack of rotting crates had been part of the set dressing for a secret theater of freedom. His eyes scanned the vast space, looking for what he hadn't seen before. The furnace room. It was a small, brick-lined closet in the far corner. He walked over, his footsteps echoing. The furnace was an ancient, hulking thing, cold for half a century. He ran his hands over the bricks, feeling for the one Abraham had described. It was there, third from the floor, fourth from the corner, slightly looser than the others. He worked it free. The cavity behind it was empty, just as he'd found with the box. But now, knowing what he knew, he looked closer. He shoved his entire arm into the space, feeling around. His fingers brushed against something metal, tucked deep into a crevice at the back. A key. Long, brass, and intricate. It didn't look like a key for any door in this warehouse. He spent the next hour searching every inch of the place, looking for a lock that would match. Nothing on the office door, the main entrance, or the rusty side gate. Frustration began to itch at him. This was a dead end, another puzzle from a ghost. He slumped against the wall near the office. The key clutched in his fist. The eviction notice on his fridge felt like it was burning a hole through his apartment miles away. He had bills to pay, a life to figure out. This was a distraction he couldn't afford. He was about to throw the key across the room in a fit of despair when his thumb found something. Tiny, precise etchings on the bow of the key. He held it up to the light. Not words, numbers, coordinates. A shiver, entirely separate from the basement's chill, ran down his spine. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely type the numbers into his Maps app. The screen pinwheeled for a heart-stopping second, then zoomed in. Not on some distant state or hidden forest. The location glowed, a pulsing red pin, less than 3 miles from where he stood, right in the middle of the old Oakwood Cemetery. The sun was beginning to dip below the skyline, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He should go home. He should face his problems, but home was about to be someone else. This was his. Abraham's voice was in his head, a whisper across time. If you are reading this, you are family, and you are safe. He wasn't safe. He was terrified, but for the first time in years he was also awake. He drove to the cemetery with a knot in his stomach so tight he could barely breathe. Oakwood was the oldest black cemetery in the city, a rolling hill of weathered headstones and forgotten names. The iron gates were locked for the evening. He parked his beat-up sedan down the street and climbed the fence, the key feeling like a live coal in his pocket. The coordinates led him to the oldest section, where the markers were so worn by wind and rain the names were just ghosts of letters. In the center of this section stood a large, beautiful mausoleum built from pale granite. The family name carved above the sealed door was faded, but he could still make it out. Freeman. It was a statement, a declaration carved in stone. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was it, the lock. But the entrance was sealed with a heavy marble slab, immovable. He circled the structure, running his hands over the cool stone. Around the back, hidden by an overgrown boxwood, was a small, discreet opening, a utility access perhaps for maintenance. It was secured by a heavy, old-fashioned padlock, rusted shut. No, not rusted. As he brushed away the grime and spiderwebs, he saw the lock was pristine, well-oiled. It was a replica, or maybe even the original, of a 19th-century design, and it had a keyhole that looked exactly like the one on the key he held. He glanced around. The cemetery was utterly still, the only sound the whisper of the evening wind through the oak trees. With a final, shaky breath, he inserted the key. It turned with a smooth, well-oiled clunk that was deafening in the silence. The padlock sprang open. He pulled it free, and the small, heavy metal door swung inward on silent hinges, revealing not a crawl space, but a set of steep stone stairs leading down into the earth. The air that wafted out was cold and carried the scent of old paper, cedar, and time. Elijah clicked on his phone's flashlight and descended, the steps worn smooth by footsteps that hadn't walked here in decades. The room he entered was not a crypt, it was an archive. Floor-to-ceiling shelves made of rich, dark cedar lined the walls. They were filled with ledgers, hundreds of them, each spine neatly labeled with dates and locations. Delta to St. Louis, 1956-58. Birmingham to Nashville, 1961. New Orleans Network. In the center of the room was a large, wooden table, and on it lay a single, open ledger, as if waiting for him. He approached it, his light trembling over the page. It was Abraham's handwriting, but the entry was different. My name is Abraham Carter. If you are here, you have found the truth. The man in the gray suit was Sheriff John Ambrose Freeman, a man born to a family of hunters who chose to become a shepherd. This place built by his family is now a testament to ours. These ledgers contain the names of every soul we guided to freedom, not as property but as people, their stories, their lives. This is not a record of the Underground Railroad, but of the one we built long after the world thought it was over. Elijah's legs gave way. He sat heavily in the wooden chair at the table, the truth washing over him in a wave so powerful it felt physical. This wasn't just history. It was a living, breathing network. It had operated into the 1960s, maybe beyond. Abraham and the sheriff, a black man and a white man, had run a secret freedom railroad right under the nose of a sleeping city. He looked at the open ledger. The last entry was in a different, shakier hand. Abraham is gone. The world is changing. The fights are different now. But the work continues in other ways. I am old. The gray suit is threadbare. I have hidden the final piece of our story with the one who started it all. Find the river. Find the star. Find the truth in the water. It was signed with a single, elegant initial, F. Sheriff John Ambrose Freeman. Elijah leaned back, the weight of it all pressing down on him. He had come looking for scrap metal to sell to pay his rent. He had found a national treasure, a story that could rewrite history books, and a final, cryptic message from a dying man. Find the river, find the star, find the truth in the water. The eviction notice, his empty bank account, his repoed car, it all seemed so small, so distant. He was no longer just Elijah, the poor black man about to lose everything. He was Elijah, the keeper of a secret, the next link in a chain that stretched back through Abraham, through the sheriff, through every name in these ledgers. He didn't know what the river meant, or the star, or the truth in the water. But as he sat in that silent, sacred space, surrounded by the ghosts of the brave, he knew one thing for certain. His inheritance was not a warehouse. It was a mission, and his life would never be the same again. The silence in the archive was a living thing. It wasn't the empty silence of his apartment, or the lonely silence of the streets. This silence was thick, heavy, filled with the whispers of 1,000 stolen journeys. Elijah sat at the wooden table for a long time, his fingers tracing the grooves in the wood, worn smooth by the hands of those who had sat here before him, plotting freedom. Find the river, find the star, find the truth in the water. The words swirled in his head, a maddening mantra. He looked around the room at the countless ledgers. Each one was a world, each name a life saved. The sheer scale of it was paralyzing. Where did he even begin? His stomach growled, a sharp, vulgar sound in the sacred quiet. The real world was reasserting itself. He checked his phone. No service down here, but above ground it was probably buzzing with missed calls from the bank, from his landlord. The thought was like a splash of cold water. He couldn't stay here forever, hiding in the past. He had a present that was actively collapsing. With a profound reluctance he stood. He couldn't take it all, it was too much, but he couldn't leave empty-handed. His eyes fell on the ledger Abraham had been writing in when he felt the walls closing in, the one mentioned in the journal, the one he thought held all the secrets. He carefully lifted it from the shelf. It was heavier than it looked. He also took the small, open ledger from the table, the one with Freeman's final message. He needed their voices with him. He climbed the steps out of the mausoleum, locking the padlock behind him. The key felt different in his hand now. It wasn't just a key. It was a responsibility. The night air was cool on his face, a shock after the timeless climate of the archive. He climbed the fence and got back into his car, placing the ledgers on the passenger seat with a reverence usually reserved for a sleeping child. His apartment was exactly as he'd left it, a small, cluttered space filled with the anxiety of impending doom. The eviction notice was still on the fridge, held by a magnet from a pizza place he couldn't afford anymore. He dropped the ledgers on his kitchen table, pushing aside a stack of unopened bills. He made a cheap cup of instant coffee and sat down. He opened Abraham's ledger first. The pages were filled with that same strong, determined script, but as he read, he saw the fear creeping into the margins. April 17, 1959. A near thing today. A young man, James, from Tupelo, he was followed. We had to move him 3 times in one night. The fear in his eyes, I have seen it in my own. I fed him soup and told him the story of Moses. Not the Bible one, our Moses. Harriet, he smiled. For a moment the fear was gone. Elijah wasn't just reading history, he was feeling it. The soup, the fear, the desperate attempt to offer comfort. He could see it. He turned the page. May 5, 1959. The man in the gray suit came tonight, not as a sheriff but as a friend. He brings news from the wider world. The tensions are growing. The resistance to our work is becoming more organized. He fears there is a leak. Someone on the city council is asking too many questions. We have decided to create a decoy, a false ledger. I will keep it in the warehouse. The true record will be moved to the sanctuary. The mausoleum. So the warehouse discovery was part of the plan, a deliberate misdirection to protect the real treasure. Abraham and Freeman weren't just brave, they were brilliant. He read on, late into the night, the cheap coffee souring in his stomach. He read about close calls, about moments of breathtaking courage, about small, quiet victories. He read until his eyes burned. He was no longer Elijah, the failing man. He was a witness. He finally fell into a fitful sleep on his couch, the ledgers on the floor beside him. He dreamed of rivers, of silver stars sinking into dark water, of a man in a gray suit with a kind, tired face. The pounding on his door the next morning was like gunshots. He jolted awake, his heart instantly racing. Sunlight streamed through the dirty windows. He glanced at his phone. 9:00 a.m. The bank opened at 9. The pounding came again, louder, more insistent. Elijah Carter, open up. It wasn't the bank. It was the landlord, Mr. Garrity. His voice was a permanent sneer. Panic, cold and sharp, seized him. He scrambled, shoving the ledgers under the couch, hiding the key in his pocket. He ran a hand over his face, trying to look like he hadn't just been woken by the ghosts of the past. He opened the door a crack. Mr. Garrity stood there, a portly man in a cheap suit, his face flushed with self-importance. Behind him stood a large man in a security uniform, an eviction enforcer. "Garrity," Elijah said, his voice rough with sleep. "Don't Garrity me," the man spat. "You're 3 weeks late, you're out today, now. Randy here is going to help you pack." "This is illegal," Elijah said, though he knew it was a weak protest. "You need to give me more notice." "I gave you notice." Garrity waved a piece of paper in his face. "This is it. Now move or we'll move you." Elijah felt a hot surge of shame and anger. This was his life, being shoved out of a dingy apartment by a man who looked at him like he was trash. He thought of Abraham, facing down men with ropes and laws designed to destroy him. His own struggle felt both insignificant and deeply connected. "Just give me an hour," Elijah pleaded, the fight draining out of him, "to pack my things." Garrity looked him up and down, his lips curled. "1 hour. Randy will be right outside this door. If you're not out, he carries you out, and whatever's left in there is mine." He turned and walked away, leaving the hulking Randy standing guard. Elijah closed the door, his back against it, his eyes closed. Despair washed over him. This was it. Rock bottom. He was about to be homeless, his car was next, and all he had to his name were the clothes on his back and 2 old books full of secrets that couldn't pay the rent. He looked around the cramped, shabby apartment. What did he even have to pack? A few changes of clothes, a photo of his mother, a beat-up guitar he hadn't played in years, and the ledgers. The ledgers. A cold, clear thought cut through the panic. He couldn't let Garrity get them. He couldn't leave them in some storage locker or worse, thrown in a dumpster. They were all that was left of Abraham and Freeman's work. They were proof. They were his. He moved quickly, fueled by a new kind of fear. He stuffed his clothes into a single, worn duffel bag. He put his mother's photo and his wallet in his pockets. He slung the guitar over his shoulder. Then he carefully, reverently placed the 2 ledgers into the duffel bag, burying them between his jeans and t-shirts. They were the most valuable things he owned. He opened the door. Randy looked at him, then peered into the empty apartment. "That's it," Elijah said, his voice flat. Randy shrugged and stepped aside. Elijah walked out of the building, the duffel bag heavy on his shoulder, the guitar case bumping against his leg. He didn't look back. He got into his car, the only home he had left, and just sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles were white. He was adrift. He had nowhere to go. The library, a park. He could maybe sleep in his car for a night or 2, but that was a short-term solution with a very predictable bad ending. His phone buzzed. It was a text from his friend Mike. "Hey man, you still alive? Haven't heard from you in a bit." Mike was a mechanic, a good guy. He lived in a small house with a decent-sized garage he used as a workshop. A wild, desperate idea began to form in Elijah's mind. It was a long shot. It was humiliating, but it was all he had. He drove across town, the weight of his situation settling on him with each mile. Mike's house was a modest, slightly unkempt bungalow with a detached garage out back. He found Mike under the hood of an old Honda, covered in grease. "Elijah," Mike said, wiping his hands on a rag. "What's up, man? You look like hell." "I am hell," Elijah said, the words tumbling out. "Mike, I got evicted. This morning I have nowhere to go. I was wondering, could I maybe crash in your garage for a few days, just until I figure something out. I can help you with work. I can pay you back." Mike's friendly face grew serious. He looked at Elijah's duffel bag, his guitar, the desperation in his eyes. He sighed. "Man, that's rough. Yeah, of course. The garage is a mess, but it's dry. There's a couch in there. You're welcome to it." The relief was so powerful it almost buckled Elijah's knees. "Thank you, Mike. Thank you. I won't be any trouble." "Don't worry about it," Mike said, clapping him on the shoulder. "What are friends for? Now help me get this alternator out and we'll call it rent." For the next few hours, Elijah worked alongside Mike, his hands busy with wrenches and sockets, his mind 1,000 miles away. The physical labor was a strange comfort. It was simple. A problem with a solution. Tighten this bolt. Remove that part. It was nothing like the tangled, overwhelming mystery he had inherited. When they finished, Mike pointed him to the garage. It was cluttered with tools, car parts, and the smell of oil and gasoline. But in the corner was an old, stained couch that looked like paradise. Mike brought him a blanket and a pillow. "You good?" Mike asked. "Yeah, Mike, I'm good. Thank you, seriously." "Any time, brother." Mike went back into the house and Elijah was alone again. He sat on the couch, the springs groaning in protest. He unzipped his duffel bag and pulled out the ledgers. In the dim light of the single bare bulb hanging from the garage ceiling, they seemed to glow. He opened the one with Freeman's final message: "Find the river, find the star, find the truth in the water." He needed a system. He needed to think like they did. He found a notepad and a pen on Mike's workbench. The river, the obvious one, was the Mississippi. It was the border, the lifeblood, the historic route, but it was too big. It could mean anything. A specific spot on the river, a town, a code name. The star, the sheriff's badge. He had it right in his pocket. He took it out, the silver cool in his hand. He turned it over and over, find the star, but he already had it, so it must mean something else. A location, a person, the North Star, that was the old freedom symbol. Follow the drinking gourd. The truth in the water, that was the most baffling. Truth in water, a message in a bottle, something submerged. He lay back on the couch, staring at the ceiling, the badge held over his face. The light glinted off its surface. He noticed something he hadn't before. On the back of the badge, around the pin, were tiny, almost microscopic engraving, not the manufacturer's mark. Letters. He sat bolt upright, holding it under the light. He squinted. It was hard to read, the engraving worn, almost smooth. It looked like numbers and letters. N39 degrees 6, W94 degrees 35, and below that a single word, witness. Coordinates again. His hands were trembling. He grabbed his phone, his fingers clumsy on the screen. He entered the coordinates. The map app zoomed in. It wasn't the cemetery this time. The pin dropped right on the banks of the Missouri River, just at the edge of the city, in a run-down industrial area that had been abandoned for years. A place called Riverbend Yards. The river. He looked from the badge in his hand to the phone screen. The star had led him to the river. This was it. This was the next step. It was past midnight. The city was quiet. Mike's house was dark. He should wait for morning. He should be sensible. But sensible had gotten him evicted. Sensible was sleeping on a friend's couch. Abraham and Freeman hadn't been sensible. They had been brave. He quietly packed the ledgers back into his duffel bag. He couldn't leave them. He slipped out of the garage, got into his car, and started the engine, the sound unnaturally loud in the sleeping street. He programmed the coordinates into his GPS and started driving. The drive to the river felt like a dream. The streets were empty, the streetlights casting long, lonely shadows. He followed the GPS until the paved roads turned to cracked concrete and then to rutted dirt. He was in the heart of the old industrial district. Decaying warehouses, rusted train tracks, and the constant, low hum of the city behind him. The GPS announced, "You have arrived at your destination." He was at a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. Behind it, he could see the dark, churning water of the Missouri River and the silhouette of a massive, derelict grain elevator, its skeletal frame towering against the night sky. A sign, hanging by a single chain, creaked in the wind. Riverbend Storage and Transport. Find the river, find the star, find the truth in the water. He parked the car off the road, hidden behind a thicket of overgrown weeds. He grabbed his duffel bag and a flashlight from the glove compartment. The fence was old. He found a section where the chain link had been cut and pulled back, just enough for a person to squeeze through. He slipped inside. The grounds were a graveyard of industrial machinery. He made his way towards the giant grain elevator, its concrete silos rising like tombstones. According to the coordinates, this was the spot. But what was he looking for? Another key. Another door. He shone his light around the base of the elevator. Weeds, broken glass, the skeleton of a long-dead bird. Nothing. He walked towards the riverbank, the mud sucking at his shoes. The truth in the water. Was he supposed to go into the river? He stood at the edge, the dark water moving swiftly, powerfully, just feet away. The wind picked up, cold and biting. He felt a crushing sense of disappointment. This was a dead end. The truth had washed away decades ago. He turned to leave, his shoulders slumped, when his flashlight beam caught something on one of the massive, rotting wooden pilings that supported an old, collapsed dock. It was a symbol, carved into the wood, weathered but still clear. It was a five-pointed star, identical to the one on the badge in his pocket. His heart leapt into his throat. He scrambled down the muddy bank towards the piling. The star was carved at chest height. In the center of the carved star was a small, round hole, a keyhole. It was too small for the key from the cemetery. He looked at the sheriff's badge in his hand. On the back, next to the pin, was a small, protruding nub. He had thought it was just part of the clasp. He pressed the badge against the carving. The nub fit perfectly into the hole. He pushed. There was a soft, deep click from within the old piling. A hidden compartment, sealed against the elements for over half a century, sprung open. It was a small, watertight metal box, nestled inside the wood. With trembling, mud-caked fingers, Elijah pried it out. It was heavier than he expected. He carried it back up the bank to a patch of dry ground and set it down. This was it, the truth in the water. He took a deep breath and opened the box. There was no ledger inside, no journal, no more cryptic notes. The box was filled with packets of photographs, wrapped in oilskin, and beneath them, nestled in a bed of faded velvet, were two objects. The first was a woman's locket, simple and silver. The second was a small, leather-bound Bible, its cover swollen and stained from humidity. He picked up the first packet of photos. They were black and white, stiff and formal. A portrait of a severe-looking white man in a sheriff's uniform, John Ambrose Freeman. He looked young, his jaw set, his eyes holding a surprising depth. There were other photos of him with a beautiful woman with warm eyes, his wife perhaps, and then a photo that made Elijah stop breathing. It was a group portrait taken secretly from a distance. It showed two men standing on a riverbank, not far from where Elijah now sat. One was Sheriff Freeman, out of uniform, in a simple work shirt and trousers. The other was a tall, lean black man with a proud posture and intelligent eyes, a man Elijah recognized from the single, grainy photo tucked in Abraham's journal. Abraham Carter. They were standing together not as sheriff and fugitive but as partners, as friends. They were looking at each other, and even in the grainy, aged photograph, the respect and shared purpose between them was palpable. This was the truth, not just a secret alliance but a deep, abiding bond that had defied the very fabric of their world.